So we've obviously talked about, setting up everything. This is amazing. This is how you figure things out. But I can imagine there are also some challenges, right? So do you see or have you encountered any potential drawbacks or challenges of or while implementing this skill-based hiring? James, would you like to share first on this one?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, loads of challenges. So I think from getting adaption in the business is really, as I said before, is really a process to help people to understand how to ask good questions and how to test a proficiency of a certain skill. It takes a lot of education, a lot of training. It's time consuming, and how to support that with the systems. So we use Greenhouse, which is it's our ATS. I think it's really good. We can set it up how we like, but can we, for all 150 jobs, have the right interview questions in place, the right attributes in place? Yeah, you can, but it's super time consuming. So maybe we start with our evergreen roles, so the roles which we're always hiring for. Whereas when we get a new role through, yeah, it relies on the recruiter to manually set it up. So number one challenge is, I would say, time consuming. And number two challenge is, how do you assess a proficiency within a skill? So how do you know if someone has excellent Photoshop experience or excellent people management experience versus just good, or do they have enough experience to be a director versus a manager? So how do you differentiate? That's challenging, and I think we're learning from that the whole time. And what we're trying to do is measure the quality of hire to see were we right with our assumptions, or could we do something different. But I think how to assess and how to scale it, are two of the biggest challenges.
Yeah, I second that, especially on the setting it up. I think we see a lot of, from Accelerate, we also see a lot of gaps in scorecards, and, companies not having scorecards for different interviews and then having to set them up for all the different roles is usually a challenge. But yeah, I think it's a step-by-step approach. And I do like the starting with the evergreen ones that, you're always going to be hiring from, and then slowly integrating to the rest. Elisa? Any challenges on your side?
I 100% agree with James. I think those are the challenges that we all face, is actually the real world implementation. Yeah. So having a framework and a philosophy or processes in place is great. Yeah. And then if you actually try to implement it, you see how it works in practice. And I would like to add as well to that, of course, hiring is not a relative process. So there are multiple factors that actually influence a hiring decision. So even if you do skill-based hiring, hiring managers will still evaluate the personality, the motivation, simply the communication of candidates also during the process, whether they follow up or not. Those make differences in the decision-making at the end as well. And therefore, I agree with what James said, that even if you have dedicated processes in place and focus on skills, at the end, the question is, did you actually deliver or make your decision based on those skill assessments that you've done? And I read a very interesting paper from Harvard Business Review, which can be found on Google, where they actually assessed skill-based hiring with more than 11,000 roles, where companies excluded degrees as a requirement in their jobs to make sure that they are able to do skill-based hiring, and only an increase of 3.5% of hires without degrees were made at the end. So this shows that the effect even of hiring people only based on skills and ignoring more or less their degrees where it's not necessary and required for the job, the effect is still pretty low nowadays. So I think this is something that really needs iteration and time. Yeah. So doing the first steps and implementing all those processes and frameworks is necessary for the business to perform, but it needs time to actually get there.
Yeah, I agree with you, Elisa. And I think also what we've seen also, especially in startups that are, just starting out, implementing process is one of the most difficult things, because things are always changing and expectations are always changing. So for example, you have the whole process mapped out. These are the skills we're hiring for. And then 2 weeks later, we have to change the whole role completely. So I can imagine having to go back to the drawing board over and over again. So yeah, that's a really good point there, that there are a lot of other factors in play as well, usually. Matthias, on top of those challenges, is there anything else to add on?
Yeah, I couldn't agree with all of them, but I think the mindset shift, right? So the mindset shift of managers, I sometimes feel like we're still very obsessed with our job architecture and the way we look at jobs and requirements and responsibilities, and now suddenly to request from them to say, look, but what are your skill gaps actually, and how is your goal set, or how is your progress and achievement of goals happening at the minute, and when you have the opportunity to now reshape a little bit your team, like how would you do it and why, and what is missing, are questions that sometimes leaders are not used to being asked. And then this is a little bit of a different ball game, right? So it needs a lot of coaching and enablement, and it probably also needs a couple of iterations. So what we say, we probably have a realistic picture after 2 to 3 performance rounds, and we cannot expect after first performance round that, hey, we have a clear skill picture of our organization. By far not, right? Because there are lots of iterations and lots of learnings out of this. And the same thing with skill-based hiring. Yeah. So I do believe it's important that people know if we commit to this, it takes time to master it. Yeah. As it always does with everything you do. And therefore getting used to it and getting, learning all the time on, hey, these are data points and that actually makes sense. And, we have more learnings from this. This is something which we are constantly doing. And at the moment, we are currently surveying our leaders to say, look, based on the skill-based approach that we have, how happy are you? What kind of data would you like to see? Do you think like that your people understand this, right? Do you understand it? Are we missing something? How good were we in the first match? So iterating this and surveying this and trying to do this in a co-creation style, I think is probably something that takes time, but will have a meaningful impact rather sooner than later.
Awesome. Thank you, Matthias. I will quickly move on to the next.